Hey everyone. So this week we're going to talk a little bit more about the research process, where scientific information comes from, how it is generated, and where we can find it. So let's first talk a little bit about the literature in science. And what we're really talking about when we're talking about scientific knowledge and the communication of, new science as it comes out, we're talking about peer-reviewed papers. Peer-reviewed papers are often, also synonymous with primary literature or primary sources. So we'll use those terms interchangeably, right? But no matter what you call it, a peer-reviewed paper is an article published in a scientific journal that has been reviewed by other scientists, other experts in the field, in order to determine its scientific merit and its significance, its contribution to the field. Now, I have served as a peer reviewer for many different journals. I also serve as an editor for an ornithological journal where, as an editor, what my job is when people are trying to publish a new scientific article, it's my job to find reviewers who are experts in the content of that article and ask them to review that paper to determine whether our journal should publish that paper. And the whole purpose of the peer review process is to make sure that the highest quality science is being published. Its job is to keep, poor science or junk science, or poor science by good scientists, as sometimes happens, from being published, right? So the purpose of a peer reviewer and what their job is as they go through these manuscripts when they're submitted for publication is to look at how novel is the research question, is the methodology appropriate, have the statistical analyses that have been employed, are they appropriate, have the interpretations and conclusions drawn from those data analyses, are they logical, rational, and do they make sense, right? So that's sort of the whole purpose of the peer review process. And this is the primary means of how scientists communicate new science to other scientists, right? It's literature written by experts for other experts. And the reason that I'm saying that is because as you get more practice reading the primary literature, you're going to find that this is not easy reading. So don't think that you're going to be able to read, this paper or that paper in 5 minutes. You're going to want to set aside time, and I mean time, to read these papers. Even someone who is very familiar with the primary literature, even within my field, it's not light reading. So make sure from a time management perspective that you're really giving yourself the time to go through these papers. So let's talk about how a scientist or someone like you, who are budding scientists, of course, might find articles for a particular topic, because this week, of course, you are picking your topic for your research proposal, so you will have to do a literature search, relatively soon. So let's talk about how you're going to do that and where you might look, right? So a literature search is, what we would call a survey of the current knowledge in the field about some particular topic. That's a generic sort of, approach to it, right? But what its purpose is to allow you to identify important and useful papers for your particular topic. It allows you to look at, how different sub-disciplines in psychology might approach a problem. For example, a cognitive perspective, a biopsychological perspective, a perceptual perspective, a clinical perspective, right? Sometimes they are connected, sometimes they disagree, and so that's part of the fun of a literature search, right? So when you're looking through these literature searches, and we'll do an example in just a little bit, you'll notice that there are many different journals in the psychological disciplines, right? So there are many different journals. Some of them are broad, like, for example, Journal of Experimental Psychology, which encompasses all sorts of experiments and studies that have been done in psychology, to more focused journals that only look at, one or a few specific disciplines in psychology. For example, learning, memory, and cognition, or human perception and performance, right? So it just depends on the journal and what its scope is, right? And when we're thinking about scope, sometimes this phrase impact factor will come up. Basically, impact factor is a way to look at how significant a new study is going to be based on how many citations on average an article in a particular journal gets cited in New Science. The larger the number, the more influential the paper is. Don't worry about it so much, but if you see it floating around as a way of measuring just how important a paper is, it's there. As I was saying before, when a manuscript or a study is submitted to one of these journals, an editor, such as myself, decides whether reads the article, decides whether it would be a good fit for the journal, and if so, looks for other experts or peers to review that manuscript, and then based on the recommendations of those reviewers, decide whether to accept the manuscript as it was written. It might require some revisions and be asked to resubmit it again, or if it's no good, we'll reject it. Any of those three can happen. Usually it's one of these two. So let's talk a little bit about where you're going to find these peer-reviewed sources and peer-reviewed papers. The best places to find them, as you probably can guess, are going to be online databases. One of them, and it's linked in the PowerPoint that this is on Blackboard, is through the Newman Library, through Baruch College. There are definitely lots of databases there. I would recommend PsycArticles if you're looking specifically for psychology, topics. However, I also recommend that you start with Google Scholar. Google Scholar has a very good algorithm. It is pretty good at figuring out what you're looking for, even if you don't know the right search terms or you're not really sure if you got the keywords right. So, I recommend starting with Google Scholar, and that's the example that I'm going to show you, and show you a few tricks of the trade for how to use Google Scholar effectively. Obviously, you can physically go to a library, but, it's 2021. One other place you can look for articles, though, are at researchers' websites through the colleges or universities or research institutions that they work at. So if there's an article that you're looking for that you can't, that they're asking you to pay for, please never pay for an article, really important. And you can't seem to get it through any of the databases that you're working on, see if you can find the first author's website. Sometimes they'll post articles of theirs on their websites, or always feel free to reach out and email them and ask them for a copy. They'll be happy to send it to you. So let's talk a little bit about Google Scholar. It's easy to find. It's www.scholar.google.com. If you've already done Google Scholar before, bear with me. You might learn something new anyway. They're really good. Some of the articles are available for free, but of course, if you start there, you might not be able to get it for free through Google. You might want to actually take then, copy the title of the article and go through CUNY to see if they have access. So let's just do an example. Let's say you are studying distracted driving and you're interested in, you don't really know much about the topic. So you're going to do a literature search on it to figure out what knowledge there is out there. And so let's say you're actually interested for whatever reason in gender differences, or whether there even are gender differences in distracted driving behavior, right? So one thing you might do, and I'm going to stop here. And so now we're at Google Scholar. So let's go ahead and type in distracted driving gender differences. Now remember, this isn't something that you're going to necessarily do. This is just an example that I'm going to use to help you find or help you use Google Scholar effectively. Okay, so once you have entered that in, you're going to see a bunch of stuff. Let's look here very quickly. Anything you see linked on the right-hand side means you're going to have free access to that article. If you see the blank space here on the right side, chances are the only thing you're going to be able to get is the abstract, and that's if you click on the titles here. Okay. Google Scholar is also very useful for a lot of different reasons. If you want a specific year or more recent articles, you can customize the range of years for when you want to see results from. So that's useful. You also can search by related articles. So let's say you are interested in this article, right? If you click on related articles, I'm going to open it up in a new tab. If you click on related articles, this is a list, a search result for a bunch of articles that are going to be related to that original article. That's very useful. If you see this cited by here, if you click on that, this is going to be a list of new papers that have come out that have cited that study. So it's papers that have come out after that study that have cited that study. So it's going to mean that those are also going to be closely related articles to this particular topic, right? So that's very useful when you're not really sure necessarily about, you know, what to search for, what kinds of search terms to put in for a specific topic. One last thing I want to show you here, see this quotation mark? If you click on it, it's going to give you the correct APA reference for your references section. Use it. There's absolutely no reason to lose points on something like this. Just copy it and paste it into your references section and be done with it. Got it. Okay, let's scroll down. There's one paper I want to show you because it's a paper that is sort of one of like the original studies in distracted driving behavior, because I also want to give you some ideas for how to effectively read this kind of literature. So if you scroll down, notice this paper has been cited over 400 times. So it's been a pretty influential article. It came out a long time ago, right? It's from 2003, so it's really, really, really old. But it was one of the first, and it was pretty cool. So if you click here, it's going to take you to the PDF of that article, right? It's going to show you it's written by 3 authors, including Peter Hancock and Lucinda Simmons and one other. And you'll see the paper is broken up into different sections, right? First, you're going to see the journal, the volume number, the year, the pages, the title, the authors, their affiliations, like where they work, the abstract, which is a summary of the article, these keywords here, right? Feel free to use these as search terms in Google Scholar. That is their purpose. That's what keywords are for. So always look for keywords. If you're struggling for search terms, look at those. That's what they're for. Use them as search terms, and in combination with one another or from other articles, you can mix and match to find articles that you might be interested in. So feel free to do that as well. Okay, so I very briefly want to go through the different sections of the article and what kinds of things you might want to look for, right? Always go through the title and the abstract to get a sense of the topic of the article, its research questions, and main conclusions, right? The introduction is going to be very useful for you, especially if you're unfamiliar with the topic, unfamiliar with scientific writing style, and things like that, because the more you read, the more, comfortable you're going to be emulating that kinds of style, especially as you paraphrase, and also to find other studies to cite. So, that's always going to be useful. Remember, if you want to cite the information from someone's introduction, you actually have to find the studies that they cite and cite them. You can't cite the introduction of a study because that's not like the methodology of the study that you're reading, right? So please remember to do that, and always remember to summarize and paraphrase in your own words. It's difficult, it takes a lot of practice, and part of my job is to give you feedback on how well you're doing. But don't copy directly from the article, even if you cite. Doesn't matter, you can't copy word for word. I'm not going to read this to you, I'm just giving you some screenshots of the article there. The method section, next section that I want to talk about. Enough information so that we could carry the study out exactly the same way they did. Information about the participants, the apparatus, the design, and most importantly, operational definitions of their variables. How did they define their variables, and what did they measure, right? The results are going to be chock full of statistics. Don't worry about them too much. I'm sorry I'm skipping through because I'm limited to 15 minutes here. Figures. Always look at the figures for the main results. It's the best thing to do instead of trying to struggle through the stats. please do let me know if you have any questions about this.